Cholesterol. Interesting stuff here. Okay. Cholesterol makes up about 20% of the plasma membranes of every one of our cells. We've seen the phospholipid cell membrane drawn many times by Ms. Foster. So just keep in mind that that phospholipid membrane also has some cholesterol in it. And this, a little bit about the structure of cholesterol here. These, this shape right here. Hexagon. Yeah, these hexagon carbon chains, and this OH is called a sterol. And there are other sterols, other chemical compounds, other enzymes in our bodies. There's actually something called plant sterols that combats cholesterol in our body. And then let's talk about the digestion of cholesterol. Okay, so the digestion actually starts up here in our stomach. When our food comes down our esophagus, the fat in our food is hit by the hydrochloric acid, and that turns the fat into these kind of fat globules right here. Then we have bile coming in from our gallbladder that turns these globules into little droplets, right? It breaks up those triglycerides into two fatty acids and a monoglyceride, turns the cholesterols into cholesterol esters, and then those small molecules are moved inside this missile, and this missile is composed of bile and phospholipids, and it moves the fats from inside the intestine, the small intestine, to the mucosal cells of the small intestine. Remember that fats are insoluble, so they always need to be surrounded by some sort of protein coat in order to become water soluble throughout our body. And then from this in this mucosal cell of the small intestine, a chymocron is produced. This chymocron is a lipoprotein. Lipoproteins help transport lipids or fats throughout our bodies by creating that protein shell for them, making them water soluble. This lipoprotein is called a chymocron again. It's the largest and least dense lipoprotein, and it is only made in the small intestine after a meal. And this chymocron takes the fats from the mucosal cells through the lymphatic system into the blood. And then in the blood, this chymocron is made up of 85% triglycerides, only 5% cholesterol, and 10% proteins and phospholipids, which is that shell. And then this chymocron's going through our blood, and then when it meets a cell, either an adipose cell or a muscle cell, that's going to store or use the triglycerides, there's an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase that just kind of hangs out outside these adipose cells. And when a chymocron comes into contact with the adipose cell, this lipoprotein lipase breaks down these triglycerides again into two fatty acids and a monoglyceride so that they can go into that adipose tissue for storage or usage or whatever. And then once all the triglycerides are removed from this chymocron, it is redigested, it's digested, picked up by the liver, right? And then the liver produces something called VLDLs. This is another lipoprotein. Very low density lipoprotein is what it stands for. 80% of these are formed in the liver, and about 20% are formed in the intestine, meaning that the fats contained in the VLDLs come from our diet, 20% of them. This is, of course, a rough estimate. And then this is made up of about 52% triglycerides, 20% cholesterol, and 28% of that shell. And then VLDLs basically do the same thing as our chymocrons. They go around in our blood and they drop off their triglycerides. And when it's done dropping off most of its triglycerides, it returns from a VLDL into an LDL. And this is a low-density lipoprotein, is what's known as our bad cholesterol, right? So it's made up of 50% cholesterol, 42% of that shell, and then very small, just leftover triglycerides, 8%. And then this LDL can have three things happen to it. It can be sent to other cells to be used. Cholesterol is used to synthesize many hormones such as estrogen, progesterone, and androgen. It's also used to synthesize bile acids and vitamin D. So these LDLs can go to an endocrine cell that's going to use it to generate these, or it can go to a skin cell where it can be used to generate vitamin D. Or this LDL can just kind of float in our bloodstream down here. It's just going to stay in circulation if it's not used. And then we have something else. The last lipoprotein we have is called HDL, high density lipoprotein. This is your good cholesterol. It's only synthesized by the liver, right? And you can think of it as kind of a little Pac-Man. It's just going to go around the body picking up excess cholesterol in blood and tissues. And then it's going to take that cholesterol back to the liver. And then that cholesterol that's deposited in the liver by HDL gets turned into bile acid that is secreted. And that's the only way that cholesterol is secreted by the body and actually leaves the body. Now, let me talk about a disease called atherosclerosis, or high blood cholesterol. So this is a artery. This lumen space is the tube in the middle where the blood and cholesterol and nutrients all flow, right? It's a lumen is any sort of cavity in our body. The empty space in the middle is called a lumen. Then we have this endothelium that is created by endothelial cells. Intima, also endothelial cells. Media, which is created, media and venta, are both created by smooth muscles, fibroblasts, elastin, right? And then, so in our artery, we have our blood cells, right, our platelets. We also have LDLs, right? And the first characteristic of atherosclerosis is damage to this endothelial lining, right? So you see this damage mark all along here. That can happen because of smoking. That can happen because of cancer, different diseases, different medications. It can actually be caused by too much LDL in the blood. And when you have this damaged endothelium, it allows LDLs when you have a damaged endothelium and high blood amounts of LDL, then it's very likely that this LDL is going to kind of slip into your intima here. And then once it's in this intima, it's going to become oxidized by free radicals that are in the intima. And then these oxidized LDLs are going to cause an inflammatory response. They're saying, hey, I'm inflamed, come get me, white blood cells, right? So then these monocytes, which are now macrophages because they're responding to this inflammation, they're going to come down here and they're going to eat up all of these oxidized LDLs and the lipids inside of them. And then once they consume those, it's called a foam cell. Then when these foam cells die, they release their lipids and create this lipid core, right? And at the same time, some smooth muscle cells and fibers and elastin from the media and the adventa are moving up to try and put some sort of cap. It's called a fibrous cap on top of this this damaged, or under this damaged endothelium. That's your body's attempt to try and heal this lesion. And then you have this giant lipid core. Your artery is going to expand outwards before it encroaches on the lumen. So as you can see by the picture, it expands outwards before expanding inwards. And then a lipid core can sometimes burst. This is most likely to happen when you have a big old lipid core and a really thin fibrous cap, which means that you have very little endothelium and a lot of this, a line of this fibrous smooth muscle cells. And then remember that fat is water insoluble, so when it goes into your blood, which is mostly water, you're going to have all these platelets immediately stuck to it. and it's going to cause a lot of problems for you. It can completely block an artery. It can do a lot of bad things. All right, so now that we understand the mechanism for atherosclerosis, let me talk about two medications that mess with this whole cycle. So the first of them is going to bind with bile in the small intestine, making it so that that bile is already busy. So it can't break down these fat globules. So those fat globules are going to go right out through your poop. They're not going to go into your body and do any of this. They're just going to stay there, and the only fats from your body are going to be produced by your liver. And then the next medication, and this is going to be your Lipitor, your statins. It's your most popular prescribed cholesterol medicine, and it inhibits the synthesis of cholesterol in your liver. So it's going to inhibit some enzyme in the process of turning other fat molecules into cholesterols. So the statins kind of affect this line, where the medications that bind with bile kind of affect this line. All right, and that's cholesterol.